The US housing market, a massive super bubble ready to pop at any moment, with interest rates approaching 6% and sky-high prices that seem to go up every single day. Everyone on YouTube is eager to make the next great crash prediction. Young first-time homebuyers are finding it increasingly difficult to afford a home. The average mortgage payment has climbed to well over $2,200, an increase of almost 100% since 2019. Everyone eager to buy is baffled and frustrated. How is it possible this market just keeps going up and up? In today's video, we cut through the BS and look at the most underrated leading indicator for housing prices, one that was used by infamous hedge fund manager Michael Burry to predict the last big crash, an infamous trade that made his firm billions and was dramatized into one of the most watched finance movies of all time, The Big Short. Some of you watching this video may remember 2006. It was a different time in America, but something similar was happening to housing. Rates were approaching 7%, yet prices were exploding. From 2001 to 2006, the median home price in America increased nearly 50%, going from $171,000 in late 2001 to nearly $257,000 in 2007. People were rushing into real estate for all the wrong reasons. Loans were easy to get and everyone got greedy. Eventually, it all came crashing down, leading to the worst recession since 1929, the Great Recession as it was called. A period in American history that was plagued by a sharp decline in economic activity following the bursting of this epic housing bubble. Now many are wondering, is this going to happen again? If we bring back the chart of housing prices, we can see that lately prices have been moving sharply up, similar to that early 2000s period. But like everyone else, the big question remains, how can we know when the top is in? Well, there are a number of really good theories, but there is one in particular that stands out from the rest. You see, back here in 2007, right around the peak of the housing market, which occurred in the spring of that year, nobody was really expecting the burst to happen, except this guy, of course. But there was something that flashed a warning before it all went downhill. Outside of prices, rates, supply, demand, and every other variable that all these other channels will show, there is only one, in my opinion, that clearly predicts bubbles. Before I reveal it, I need you to understand some quick background. You see, home prices in America have been relatively simple to understand. They have essentially followed income levels and inflation throughout the past 70 years. This chart shows exactly this. Now looking at this, you can see when prices have jumped above the black line, we have had a bubble. Today, investors face a dilemma. Because inflation is at its highest point in 40 years, the Fed is going through a phase of aggressive monetary tightening, and top firms predict stock market returns under 5% until 2035. Restructuring your portfolio has never been more difficult or more crucial. So where can you turn? Well, you all know that I've been advocating for alternatives for years, and they've done pretty well for me. It seems like people are catching up. A recent JP Morgan report declared alternative assets are no longer optional. In light of this new normal, certain platforms have arisen giving access to the top alternative asset classes. There's one in particular that seems like a no-brainer to me. It's called Masterworks. Masterworks.io has solidified itself as the platform for investing in contemporary art. They let you access their exclusive investments from names like Banksy, Monet, and other iconic artists for just a fraction of what billionaires pay to purchase. Because roughly 2/3 of billionaires allocate between 10 and 30% of their overall portfolio to art, in part to diversify and because it's a natural inflation hedge, it makes sense. After all, contemporary art prices outpaced the S&P 500 total return by 164% from 1995 to 2021. And have exhibited the lowest correlation to equities of nearly any major asset class. Since 2020, Masterworks has sold 3 paintings, with each returning over 30% net IRR to investors, and their new offerings usually sell out in hours. 30+%. That's wild. If you want to get in on it early, all you have to do is go to masterworks.io, create an account, check out what they have, and invest in their offerings. And my subscribers get to skip their waitlist using the special link in my bio. Now back to real estate. In 2008, when the red deviated far above the black, we got a crash. Now zoom forward following 2012, we see that home prices began their deviation up once again. In 2022, this red line looks even worse than what it did in 2008. You may be saying, well, there it is. There's all the proof I need. We should expect a crash very soon. But it's not that simple. You see, back in 2007, the line peaked in March. We saw it begin flattening in late 2005, and the reasons for this are straightforward. Speculation. You see, people back then were eager to buy a home and make some money on it. It wasn't rare to find people with zero income buying up multiple homes because lending standards had gotten so ridiculously loose. This can be visualized by looking at that one variable I hinted at earlier, the home ownership rate. It's essentially a measurement that looks at how much of the US owns a home. While it may be harsh to hear, it turns out homes are not for everyone. This percentage has hovered around 63% for most of the last 50 years. Now, the really interesting thing about this stat is that it predicted the big crash in 2008 before it happened. You see, home ownership peaked in Q4 of 2004, nearly 3 years before we saw price declines in the market. So why am I telling you this? Well, when home ownership increases like this, what we tend to see is greed in the markets. Politicians, bankers, and the loan industry get a bit too excited about people owning homes. Not because they care about home ownership, but because it will make them rich. When greed takes over, loans get easy to hand out, and soon prices begin to matter less and less. Things get dangerous not because of market tightness, but rather because of carelessness and defaults. Michael Burry, the man who shorted real estate back in 2008, can explain this in a more technical way. He did a long lecture on what the signs were back then. They still apply today. Here is the basic summary.
This freed banks to experiment and to expand into new lines of business. None more fateful than the experiment with derivatives and subprime asset-backed securities. The private market therefore gained the capability to mount a massive response to all the government's efforts to stimulate housing. I imagine the top in the housing market would be marked by a mortgage in which home buyers of subprime quality were enticed to buy with teaser rate monthly payments near zero. The top would soon be fast upon us. As the subprime interest-only adjustable rate mortgage started to touch maximum sales channel penetration, we saw the introduction of yet another more extreme teaser rate mortgage called the pay option arm or cash flow arm. In this new type of mortgage, never before seen in a widely standardized format, the borrower could basically pay next to nothing each month.
Okay, so it all comes down to loans, bad ones, specifically the worst of the worst called an options adjustable rate mortgage or option arms. Without boring you with the details, just understand that these loans essentially allowed you to purchase a home with close to zero down and no monthly payment. You heard that correctly, little to no monthly payment. People were going crazy buying up homes left and right, and as long as the homes kept appreciating, the party went on. Soon it seemed that the entire economy was reliant on the real estate market continuing to appreciate. Fraud was starting to take over, and just when you believed that it couldn't get any worse, it did. To help you visualize just how alarming things were, take a listen to this epic clip. Turns out comedian Tim Dillon was a mortgage broker in Long Island during this euphoric time. Here he is explaining what was happening.
So if I come to you right now, let's go back. You're a mortgage broker in Long Island. I meet you in a diner, which is you call your office.
The Imperial Diner in Freeport. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, you go.
We got to make it real.
And so I meet you at your office. I come in. I say, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you, Mr. Dillon. Me and my wife just got married. You know, I'm a comedian. I saved up about $80K. You know, she wants to live. We're having a baby. She wants to live on the island. You got
Mr. Pop, I'm very glad.
Can I get a loan?
Not only can you get a loan, but let me tell you something.
Yeah.
How much of that $80K are you prepared to spend on the property?
I don't know, Mr. Dillon. I'm willing to spend about 60 or 70 of it.
Mr. Pappas, guess how much of that 80 you're gonna have to spend?
How much?
Nothing.
What?
Nothing. You're not gonna spend anything because let me explain something to you. Sit down. The wife is lovely. Would you like a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
Yeah. Wait, can
Mr. Pappas.
Can I get pancakes while I'm here?
Yeah, you can get anything. So the reality is this: we're taking the biggest loan possible. That, Mr. Pappas, will set you free. Now sign this piece of paper for Christ. And at that point, you and your wife are crying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we sign papers, then you go die.
But how do you get the loan from the bank? They're giving them away.
What are we doing? We're talking about now or back in the day?
No, back in the day.
Yeah, how did you do it?
I go to the bank. I said, Kelly, we got one. And Kelly, I said, Mr. Pappas and his wife Brittany's from Long Island. They want to go buy a piece of marble hunk of shit. She makes all the paperwork look like it should look. And then my little bank, which was called Franklin First or New World Mortgage or the Mortgage Zone or the Funding Hut or whatever it is, we send our paper to a fucking even bigger and as similarly bank like a Long Beach Mortgage or a New Century Mortgage or an Argent. And those banks were doing backdoor deals with JP Morgan, Citigroup. So those banks were underwriting the paper to the middle grade banks that were lending money to the dirtbag brokerage operating out of a van places that I worked. Okay?
Right.
So when this all, you ever played a game of hot potato?
Yeah, it's an orgy, yeah.
So when everything goes wrong,
You pass it around.
we're passing it around.
As you just heard, the early 2000s were a different time. Lenders were feeding the market bubble in ways we have never seen before in history. The circumstances today are different. So now back to our topic. Is this going to happen again? Well, lenders today have strict standards and FICO scores on mortgages are historically high. The average borrower is in much better shape and loans are typically fixed, not adjustable. Now, as the market continues its upward trajectory fueled by a massive inventory shortage, I'm sure lending practices will get looser and looser as the government steps in to, quote, fix the problem of affordable housing. But at the end of the day, it's only when the underlying operation gets corrupt that we can have a crash similar in nature to 2008. And the one stat that will capture this before it happens, the home ownership rate. Now, some are likely typing their angry comments as I speak, frustrated by this conclusion, but just remember one incredible stat. Home prices in America have only had one prolonged decline in the past 60 years. Since 1963, real estate has indeed only gone up. In the few instances outside of 2008 where it dipped, it quickly recovered in less than 18 months. Thank you guys for watching. As always, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed it.